Hi guys. Alright, hey, look where I am. You guys recognize where we are on this video? We're home. Okay, let me reset my camera. Alright, I'm going to read Nubs. Here we go. Nubs, the true story of a mutt, a marine, and a miracle. Oh, his little face. Okay, here we go. Alrighty. And it's written by Major Brian Dennis, Kirby Larson, and Mary Nethery. Here we go. Okay. And I'll read first like we do and kind of show you the pictures after. Maybe I can get a better angle here. It's a little bit better. Okay, here we go. All right. Outside a border fort in the desert of western Iraq, a small, thin dog watched and waited. His ears, let me show you the picture. There you go. Oh, hopefully that's not too dark. His ears had been cut off to make him a dog of war. He had no name and no person to call his own. Despite his size, he was the leader of his pack, a group of wild dogs that survived by eating desert mice and rats and scraps from the Iraqi soldiers stationed at the fort. As the dog scanned the desert for a possible meal, the stillness of the fall morning was broken by the roar of engines rumbling closer and closer, and he hunkered down in the sand. 3 military Humvees carrying Major Brian Dennis and his 10 Marines lumbered to a stop. They were part of Border Transition Team 352. They were there to help train the Iraqi soldiers. The other pack dogs raced to greet the men. But the dog without ears cautiously approached Brian, who knelt down on one knee to meet him. I call him Nubs because his ears look like little nubs. I'm going to read this part right now. It's a communication from Brian Dennis. Subject, Desert Dog. Date, October 2007. And here's the content of his letter. I found a dog in the desert. I call him Nubs because his ears look like little nubs. We clicked right away. He flips on his back and makes me rub his stomach. And I taught him to sit and shake in about 5 minutes. There he is getting his belly rubbed. And then over here. That night, Nubs and Brian ate dinner together. They shared Brian's MREs. You guys can see that, MREs. Or meals ready to eat, of spaghetti and Cajun beans and rice. For dessert, Nubs sampled a strawberry Pop-Tart, wagging his tail. Later that evening, Nubs stayed with Brian when it was his turn at guard duty, and together they kept everyone safe. The next day, Brian gave Nubs an extra long belly rub. Then he stepped into his Humvee and he drove away. The whole pack chased after the vehicles. Oh, announcement.
Thank you.
Yes, you can tell we're at school. The whole pack chased after the vehicles, but quickly lost interest and turned back. Not Nubs. Running faster and faster, he tried to catch up with Brian. He ran for more than a mile, but he had no way of knowing that it was against the rules for Marines to have pets. Left behind, Nubs stared after the Humvees as they disappeared into the shimmering heat of the desert. Long, lonely weeks passed without any sight of that trio of Humvees the Marines called Scout, Boss, and Chuck. At the fort, without Brian, there were no belly rubs. Winter's cold wind began to scour the desert, leaving Nubs scrambling for someplace warm to sleep. As the pack leader, he faced constant challenges from younger dogs wanting his job. Sometimes groups of dogs from other forts fought Nubs and his pack over the little food that they had. And Nubs lived his rough, harsh life, waiting for each time Boss carried Brian back to him. And then I heard at the fort without Brian, there were no belly rubs. And then here's another communication. Let's see what it says here. From Brian Dennis, subject, Nubs, date November 2007, month later. On our last trip north, I was expecting to see Nubs again, and I didn't. We didn't make it as far north as we did last trip, but I still thought that I'd see him. I hope that crazy little dog is okay. Near the end of December, when the temperature dipped to a bone-chilling 30 degrees, the Humvees again rumbled up to the border fort. The pack dogs ran to greet Brian, but not Nubs. He hung back. He was gaunt, which means like skinny, and weak from a deep wound in his side. Whoops. Shivering from pain, Nubs allowed Brian and the team medic to clean the wound and apply antiseptic ointment from the men's first aid kits. He even swallowed the child-sized dose of antibiotics that Brian gave him. But Nubs refused to eat or drink. It just hurt so much. And he tried to sleep standing up. From Brian Dennis, subject, bad news, date, December 2007. We tried to put a blanket on Nubs when we bedded down for the night in the desert, but he wouldn't let us, so I said a prayer for him. He slept near me. It got down to 18 degrees that night, and I kept waking up to check on him. Every time I woke up, I wondered if he would be alive. When Brian got up at 4 a.m. for his turn at watch, Nubs stiffly padded into place beside him. Head and tail drooping, he faithfully made the rounds with Brian. The next day, Nubs watched as Brian and his team prepared to leave. He touched his nose to Brian's face as Brian bent down to pet him goodbye. And he felt Brian's head on his, and then he heard him whisper, "Hey, buddy, you need to eat. You need to get better." Then Brian climbed into Boss, and the 3 Humvees pulled away. Determined not to be left behind again, Nubs chased after Brian. He couldn't keep up. Alone, he returned to the fort. Two long weeks later, Scout, Boss, and Chuck thundered up to Nubs' fort again. This time Nubs was there to greet them, tail wagging, but still moving slowly. For a few peaceful days, Nubs stuck close to his human pack. Brian took special care of him, doctoring his wound every morning, and Nubs gobbled up his share of Brian's MREs, especially the beef patties. They wrestled, and they played Gimme 5. Brian rubbed Nubs' belly every time he asked. If Brian stopped too soon, Nubs would paw at him and make him rub some more. Each night, after the sun set over the desert, Nubs and Brian did their job together. Under an ice-black sky of 1,000 stars, they kept watch over everyone. All too soon, it was time for Brian to leave again. Nubs followed close on his heels, and Brian tightened his winter scarf called a keffiyeh around his neck, and then climbed inside the Humvee. He leaned out and he said to Nubs, "You take care of yourself, buddy." And the vehicles rolled across the desert, slowly at first and then picking up speed, heading for the command outpost far away on the Jordanian border. Nubs cried as he chased them across the cold, coarse sand, and because of his wound he could not keep up. He dropped to the ground, exhausted and completely alone. When Nubs sat up, Scout, Boss, and Chuck were out of sight. He struggled to his feet and he began walking. Nubs trekked mile after treacherous mile across the desert, shivering through frozen days and nights. There was little to eat and even less to drink, and with barely a moment's rest, Nubs pushed on, fighting his way through territories fiercely protected by wolves and wild dogs. So it shows his map here. Here's Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, and he trekked from here all the way down there. See that? We've all heard stories sometimes of dogs going miles and miles and miles to find their owners. Well, 2 snowy days and 70 miles later, that's a lot, 70 miles, Nubs limped into the Iraqi battalion headquarters where Brian was working. And a team member ran out inside shouting to Brian, "You are not going to believe who's here." "What are you doing here?" When Nubs saw Brian, he ran with his tongue out, his tail wagging right into his arms. "What are you doing here?" Brian said as he held Nubs close and he rubbed him all over. Nubs finally felt warm again. He pressed his wet nose against Brian's cheek. Nubs watched Brian climb into Boss, ordering his team back to the command outpost just half a mile away. "Well, I know we're not supposed to have dogs at the outpost," Brian said to his men. "But if he follows us, well, what can we do?" Wink, wink. If he just follows us, right? Well, when the Humvees began to roll, Nubs trotted right behind them until they reached the command outpost. Starving and exhausted from his ordeal, Nubs wolfed down some pancakes, eggs, and sausages the Marines brought him. He made dog angels rolling over and over in the freshly fallen snow. And a few days later, he found a brand new doghouse had been built just for him. Makes very happy in there. Nubs liked living at the command outpost with Brian's men and all the other soldiers, and he proudly wore a collar the Marines had fashioned from woven bracelets sent to them from school children back home. He cheered up his new friends, collecting belly rubs and making them laugh. And even though he had his own doghouse, most nights Nub curled up in the barracks with Brian and his team. Here's his collar. But everything was about to change. Here's another letter of communication from Brian. It's from Brian Dennis. Subject: Nubs can't stay. Date: January 2008. So October, November, December, January. We're 4 months later. This all came to a crashing halt when 2 soldiers who were not a part of our team reported us, and we were given 4 days to get rid of the dog or else. Well, that night I sat down and I talked to my Marines. We knew that if we took Nubs to the fort, that he would just come back to us. This made the decision easy for me. Nubs was going to America. This dog, who had been through a lifetime of fighting, war, and abuse, was going to have a nice, sunny life and would never be cold again. So here we go. We were given 4 days to get rid of the dog or else. And then down here it says, Nubs sat close by as Brian emailed his family and friends back home, and he surprised the men as they put up flyers to raise the money needed for his journey. Excuse me, he supervised the men. They look kind of close. And then here's a copy of the flyer. Save Nubs Fund. We are trying to evacuate Nubs to the States via Jordan, through Jordan. It is going to cost upwards of $2,000 to do this. If you want to help save Nubs, bring a small cash donation by the BTT 352 COC. That's their location. Any little bit will help and will be much appreciated. You can even come visit him in San Diego when we get him there. This dog found us after walking nearly 70 miles in the desert, and we are going to help him because he is an awesome dog. And then there's a communication letter here. I'm going to read to you. From United States Marine Corps, Border Transition Team 352, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, FWD, from Border Transition Team 352 Team Leader, to Jordanian Border Authorities. Subject, passport and travel document in the case of Nubs Dennis, a privately owned dog belonging to a U.S. citizen. 1. This paperwork constitutes the passport and travel documentation for one privately owned dog named Nubs Dennis. He is 2 years old, he weighs 14 kilograms, and below is his picture. His U.S. identification number is 3236371. His final destination will be San Diego, California, in the United States of America. Signed, B.P. Dennis, Major in the U.S. Marine Corps. Nubs was the first to hear the good news. Family and friends wanted to help. Nubs posed for his passport photo. He took 3 baths in 3 days to get ready for his trip. That was tiring. On the last day, Brian packed Nubs' brown blanket and his favorite superhero toy. Brian made a leash for him out of some rope. Nubs didn't play with anyone as he usually did. Instead, he sat quietly in a corner. When it was time to go, Brian scooped him up and put him in Boss. Together, they drove to No Man's Land, which is the zone between Iraq and Jordan. And there, they met the brother of Brian's interpreter, who had agreed to help get Nubs from Jordan to the United States. He was escorted by a Jordanian official. Nubs rested in Brian's arms as he was carried to a Land Rover. He felt Brian's breath tickle his ear. Be good, buddy. Don't cause any trouble. These guys will take good care of you, and I'll see you in a couple of months. I promise. He looks sad. Like he knows, huh? And then here's another communication I'll read. From Brian Dennis. Subject, worried. Date, February 2008. It's a couple more months later. I had my interpreter call his brother every 30 minutes. I wanted to know when Nubs was headed out on the highway to Amman. I was sending him off with strangers, and I was worried that I would never see him again. Nubs sat at the border checkpoint for hours as officials pored over his paperwork, making sure that everything was in order. Finally, Nubs arrived in Amman, Jordan. The king of Jordan's veterinarian gave him his first checkup and shots, and he stayed at the vet's kennels while his travel was being arranged. Two weeks later, Nubs flew the 10-hour flight from Amman to Chicago. friends of Brian's picked him up at the airport. Nubs ate steak and strawberry Pop-Tarts for dinner. A few days later, Nubs flew out of Chicago on the last leg of his long journey. So here we see Amon Jordan flew into Chicago, and from there all the way down to San Diego in California. When Nubs stepped off the plane in San Diego, he was greeted with banners and all kinds of cameras. He patiently posed for the paparazzi. Paparazzi, isn't that cute? But he was glad to leave the airport crowd with Brian's friends, Eric and Chrissy. Nubs slept in a comfy new dog bed. He tried all kinds of tasty food. He went for walks in the dog park. But someone was missing. And I'm going to read this communication up here. From Brian Dennis. Subject, Rockstar Nubs. Date, February 2008. Well, it's official. Nubs is in San Diego living the good life like a little rock star. I can't wait to get home and take him to the beach. Well, on March 23rd, 2008, another month, Eric and Chrissy drove Nubs to Camp Pendleton. That's a big Marine base in San Diego there. The paparazzi were there again. Nubs waited and waited. When he finally saw Brian, what do you think? Nubs leaped into his arms and covered him with kisses. I love that part. Well, today, Nubs and Brian lead a busy life. They play at the dog beach and they cruise around in Brian's truck. Sometimes they go running or they hike in Mission Trails Regional Park. Nubs romps with his friends Bogey and Kublai. Nubs even goes to school. His trainer, Graham, gives him straight A's. This small dog has done amazing things in his short life. He chose to travel 70 miles alone across the desert to be with Brian. It was a miracle he survived. The bigger miracle may be that this dog of war chose to become a dog of peace. Now Nubs has a name and a person to call his own, and he shares the friendship and love he found with everyone he meets. But Nubs saves his best kisses for his best buddy, Brian. That's a great picture right there. I think that's the end there, but there's a little letter here I'm going to read to you. So here's the picture of him and Nubs. Here's what it says. Howdy. I can honestly tell you that when I met a special little dog with hardly any ears, I never could have guessed the journey that he would take me on. Though we only saw each other every few weeks, he became my little buddy in Iraq, and I started calling him Nubs, and the rest is history. It's difficult for me to imagine how hard his life was in Iraq. He lived in a war zone, he suffered abuse, and he had to fight to stay alive. The fact that he would want anything to do with people after what he went through, it was amazing in itself. But defying all odds, he bonded with my entire team, and he lifted our spirits. He would make us laugh when things were tough, and he always made everyone smile. His incredible act of friendship and devotion is a testament to the bond between humans and animals. It also shows that if you do something kind for someone, dog or human, that they'll likely never forget it. Nubs now lives with me in San Diego, California. He has it pretty good these days, going on hikes, running around the dog park, and playing with his friends Bogey and Kublai. He's adapted to life in the States, but I can't imagine how confusing the changes must have been for him. He doesn't seem to mind, though, and sometimes it almost looks like he's smiling. None of this could have been possible without the support of many amazing people. So to everyone who donated and helped out, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because of all of you, I have a friend for life. Cheers. Brian Dennis, San Diego, California. Look at that one more time. And that's the end. There's some little stuff on the back. Nubs is amazing. Super dog, fantastic dog. Nubs is a really amazing dog. I'm glad he's okay. There we go. There's the back. All right. Well, that's a very special story. I think I really am glad I picked that book for you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed as much as I did. All right. That's it. I'll see you on the next video. Maybe I can get a few more done here in the library before summer. So otherwise, it'll be me sitting on my rocking chair at home reading to you guys all summer. All right. See you later. Bye.